Hey guys, so about a month ago I made a Hidden Gems video for the Super Nintendo in which I showed to you 10 games that are technically unknown, technically hidden, not too many people are familiar with. And now I've come up with another video which is called Top 10 Most Unknown JRPGs also for the Super Nintendo. And well, it's just so sad to say that the Super Nintendo, even though being one of the best gaming consoles of all time, so important in the history of gaming, a console that revolutionized the gaming concept, and doesn't even have, I don't know, 40 RPGs? That's really lame. So most of these games are really hidden gems or just plain unknown. Whether they're bad or good, it will be up to you. So unknown because this console had so many great JRPGs. It had Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, Secret of Mana, Super Mario RPG, games that literally overshadow the rest of the games that some of them you're about to see. So half of this list was made from the Hidden Gems video that I made, so don't be too disappointed if you see the same games on this list also. But again, you will find other games that you probably didn't know. But whether you knew them or not, that's not the point. The point is that these games are really unknown. So let's begin. Number 10, Paladin's Quest. This is a game that is considered one of the worst JRPGs for the Super Nintendo. It's not as infamous as others though, but it is still a game most people remember for being bad. In my case, I have no reason to agree on that. Granted, it is not a great game, nor is it something that will have you playing for several hours per day, but I just didn't think it was bad. It may be mediocre, generic, and even repetitive and annoying at times, but I've played far worse than this. So again, if you'd like to try for yourself and give it a chance, that'll be the best for you. All I can say is that it's a turn-based RPG that starts off interesting enough to keep you attached to it, until all those small details start to surface. Will those details affect your opinion? Yes, they will. Will they be enough to make you ditch the game and consider it one of the worst? That'll be up to you. Next is Unchartered Waters New Horizons. This is actually a sequel to an NES game called Unchartered Waters that was later ported to the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. The reason I didn't include that game on this list is because it plays more like a pirate or sailor simulator than an RPG. New Horizons, however, grasped tons of RPG elements, which included a more deep narrative, well-constructed storyline, character development, and a battle system through strategy and turns. Uncharted Waters is actually a popular series of games in Japan, and there's even an online game that was out since 2005, but it didn't come out to the rest of the world until 5 years later in 2010. New Horizons for the SNES, along with its prequel, were the only physical releases to be launched outside Japan, and this one's the most known amongst them all. However, being a successful series there doesn't mean that it's successful over here. Both games, especially the first one, were heavily criticized for being tedious, boring, and redundant, particularly to those not interested in simulating trading and sailing, like me for example, which are the strong points of the games. Therefore, these games became pretty unknown over time. Are they good? Well, I've only played New Horizons and I thought it was pretty original and decent, so I recommend at least that one, especially since it does play like an RPG, more so than anything else. Number 8 goes to Draken. What a great cover, huh? Too bad it's an amazing cover for a terrible game. In fact, this is a very infamous title that is considered as one of the worst, if not the worst JRPG for the Super Nintendo, perhaps one of the worst of all time in the history of gaming. Allow me to explain something before truly understanding the hatred. First of all, this game is actually a port. Draken was originally a point-and-click adventure released for the Amiga and the Atari ST in 1989 by Infogrames, which was a French company. However, Kemco Seika, a Japanese company, were the ones who created this sort of remake for the Super Nintendo, and that's where the hatred originated. Much ironically, both the original point-and-click for the Amiga and the now RPG for the Super Nintendo were well received in Europe at first, but over time, more and more people from all around the world began complaining about it to the point of considering it a terrible and unpleasant experience. So, the game faded into obscurity after a while. In my opinion, all I'll say is this: the original game is good, the port is bad. Perhaps it should have stayed as a point-and-click adventure and left untouched by the Japanese. Number 7. Dragon View. Also in Japan, Dragon for the SNES spawned a sequel, which has almost nothing to do with the first game. I already covered this game on my Hidden Gems video for the Super Nintendo. There, I praised how the changes were positive, and gamers all around the world received it with a smile on their faces. It was now entirely an action RPG, still with the 3D overworld system, but with a much more entertaining and likable gameplay. The story of this game might be extremely generic, but the fact that it was a huge improvement over the first Dragon was all that mattered. Like I said before, Dragon should have stayed as a point-and-click adventure. Dragon View, in my opinion, should have been unrelated to it. Which leads me to believe that the reason for it being so unknown is exactly the fact that the name was changed and it was now completely made by the Japanese developers. Number 6. Brandish. Brandish is a roguelike RPG that was actually pretty popular in Japan. It spawned a series there with 3 more titles, never released outside of it. In 2009 there was a remake of this game for the PSP in Japan, and Exceed Games localized it digitally until 2015 finally. So I think it's pretty obvious why this game is very unknown outside Japan. First of all, the gameplay is really tedious and it takes a while before you get used to it. And even when you do that, it is still very unappealing and redundant, but once you get the gist of it, maybe then you like it. I'd recommend the remake over than this any day, however. Second, and another fact to take into consideration, was that back in 1994, when this game came out, Nintendo of America had to censor something in particular. You see, in Brandish you play as only one character called Ares, known as Varric in the English version. He has an antagonist called Della, whom you can play as only in the remake version. Della's costume was the reason Nintendo of America censored the game and some changes were made to the story. I mean, just look at her. I'm not sure if these changes had anything to do with the game being really unknown here, but even if some of us are against sexualizing women just like this, everybody agrees that censorship overseas always ruins things. Next is Tecmo, Secret of the Stars. So here are some games that were also included in my Hidden Gems video for the Super Nintendo. We started with The Secret of the Stars, obviously by Tecmo, which has been under a lot of people's radar for quite some time. There are those who call it generic, mediocre, there are those who don't. I personally found it okay, a good RPG, not as solid as others, but likable nonetheless. It is a turn-based RPG that is divided into several parties, each with their own leader, and to proceed in some areas, you will need these other parties. I don't know, I found that to be really interesting. So even if the story and the battle system are generic, it is still a game that you should play if you're looking for something, let's say, unique. As to why this game is very unknown, the reason is the same as many others of its kind. Some really awesome JRPGs were out there almost at the same time, so the ones that weren't that great, like this one right here, became heavily overshadowed. Still a great game. Recommended. Next is Super Ninja Boy. Super Ninja Boy is also another game that I covered in the Hidden Gems video. It's got a 2-player mode, which is awesome, and it's one of those games that you will never guess they're RPGs unless you play them. It looks like a platforming side-scroller, and guess what? It is! But the battle system is a beat-em-up so ridiculously good that you will find yourself playing this game mainly because of that. The story is really silly here. I mean, it's not a game that should be taken seriously at all, but come on, when have you seen an RPG with a battle system like this? These things I already said them in the other video, but I just can't get tired of praising the whole stupidity this game created, so stupid that it's good. Why is it unknown? First, because the cover looks like nothing like an RPG, and second, because the very poor marketing it received. Number 3, Robo Track. Robo Track is a game in which you have to create your robots, with customization included, to have them battle for you. It might look like a Pokemon ripoff, but with robots? But nope, it's very different from one. And no, I don't think it has anything to do with Star Trek. But whatever. The thing is, Robo Track is actually a pretty decent game, a perfect JRPG for kids, published by Enix. Its story, even though childish, is very well constructed and written, putting you in the shoes of a young apprentice in robot customization. The battle system is that of a turn-based RPG with some tactical elements included. Remember the attack waiting bar in Final Fantasy? Well, it's also present here. So I strongly recommend this game, even though it's pretty rare and hard to find. Lastly, the reasons why it is very unknown beat me. I think it's because the name itself kind of left people to believe it was a different kind of game, but I really don't know. In any case, it's pretty decent and I totally recommend it. Number 2, the Twisted Tales of Spike McFang. And just look at this cover. Will you guess this is a Japanese RPG? There's been a lot of controversy over this action RPG, even though it is extremely unknown. People saying it's not an RPG, people saying it's very hard and frustrating, people saying it's terrible. Me? Well, I included this on my Hidden Gems video for a reason. I don't think it's bad. Sure, it's far from being a great game and you'd rather play something else, but if you by any chance end up playing this game, I can at least guarantee you'll be entertained for a while. I admit it can get pretty frustrating at times, and I admit the story is literally nonsense since you are a rich vampire who's trying to stop an invasion from a zombie general, but if we take into consideration that this game was meant for kids, we might as well overcome its silliness. The reason for it being so unknown? Well, I think it's obvious. First is Inindo. Yeah. Oh boy, where to start? It's a turn-based RPG in which you play as a ninja during the Nobunaga era. Nobunaga himself is actually the antagonist here, so you're on a quest to stop his evil reign. You can play on spying missions, recruit other ninjas to join your cause, enter dungeons, etc. So overall, the idea behind the game is excellent, but it was very, very poorly executed. Sure, some people will say otherwise, maybe you will say otherwise once you play it, but in my experience, this game is bad. It's just bad. Not terrible, of course, just plain bad. For its time, it might be a decent game, but I guess it didn't grow up very well, especially since it was one of the first JRPGs released for this console, with graphics that look like an NES game. There are some details here that, if you pay attention, you'll see they are 16-bit, but almost everything else looks otherwise. If you're curious about it, go and play it. It's weird, it's so damn random, and most of the time you have no idea what to do or where to go. Yeah, it's one of those games. But hey, you know what's the only positive thing of this game? The soundtrack! I mean, it's awesome! Okay guys, that's my video. Thanks for watching. As usual, you will be the judge whether these games are good or bad. I was only trying to show you 10 games that are really unknown. As you probably saw in my Hidden Gems video, some of these games I consider them good, maybe you will consider them bad. That's beside the point. The point was that these games are really unknown and that they were overshadowed by the giant monsters that are Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, etc. So, pretty interesting video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find it useful. As usual, like my other most unknown videos that I've been making for the past few months. So again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time.